I slept with my wife's best friend. If you told me a few years ago that my marriage would fall apart like this, I would have laughed it off. Back then, things were perfect, or at least they felt that way. Sarah and I were that couple. You know, the ones everyone talks about like, oh, they're so in love, or I wish my marriage was like theirs. I genuinely thought we had something rare, something real. I was head over heels for her. God, I love that woman. And I trusted her more than I trusted myself. We had this connection, or at least I thought we did. I mean, we shared everything, our thoughts, our feelings, our dreams. And it wasn't like she was just my wife. She was my best friend. We'd have lazy Sundays binge-watching whatever show was trending, share inside jokes that no one else would get. And I remember the way she'd laugh at my terrible jokes. But you know how life goes? It doesn't stay like that forever. Things started to shift when Sarah's best friend Kelly came back into the picture. Let me paint a picture of Kelly for you. She's the type of woman who lights up a room, and not in the warm way. She's always the center of attention, drawing eyes wherever she goes. It wasn't just that she was pretty or had that larger-than-life personality. It was more like she thrived on chaos. And for some reason, she always had this look in her eyes, like she was daring you to play whatever game she was making up in her head. At first, I didn't think much of her influence on Sarah. I mean, it seemed harmless. A girls' night here, a coffee meet up there. I figured, hey, Sarah needs to hang out with her friend. No big deal. But looking back now, I can pinpoint when things started going off the rails. It was during one of those girl talk nights that Sarah came home all excited, saying they were planning to play a little prank, something to test our relationship. I thought she was joking, but when she pressed the idea, I felt a weird twinge in my gut. Come on, babe, Sarah laughed, trying to brush off my concern. It's nothing serious. Just a little game. Don't be so paranoid. And like the fool I was, I let it slide. Why? Because I trusted her. I trusted her so damn much that I never even considered the possibility of anything darker hiding beneath her smile. But the prank was just the start. Within a few weeks, Sarah's whole demeanor began to change. She'd come home later and later, always with some excuse that never quite sat right. Oh, we went out for drinks after work, she'd say, her voice a little too casual. Or Kelly needed someone to talk to. She's going through a lot. And then, there were times she'd say she was at the office late, but the timeline didn't match up. It wasn't obvious at first, just a few small things that didn't add up, but my gut knew. My gut knew something was off. That's when our friends, Liam and Amanda, come into play. They were close friends of ours, almost like family. We used to have double dates, barbecues, you name it. But even they started noticing things were off with Sarah. And trust me, when people outside the relationship notice the changes, that's when you know it's not just in your head. Liam, being the straight shooter he is, pulled me aside one night after dinner and said, "Man, something's weird with Sarah. I mean, have you talked to her? I don't want to pry, but she's acting kind of different." But me? Nah, I was too deep in denial. I gave him the same excuse I'd been giving myself. Nah, it's just work stress or some nonsense Kelly's dragging her into. But the truth is, I didn't want to dig deeper. I didn't want to believe that there was anything wrong. And so, I shoved it all to the back of my mind, hoping it'd just sort itself out. Funny thing is, it didn't. It only got worse. And I didn't know it then, but that so-called prank was about to tear my world apart in ways I couldn't even imagine. It didn't take long for the doubt to settle in, more like crash down on me, actually. You know when you start to notice things, and suddenly everything feels like a clue? That's exactly what happened. Sarah's late nights at work became a routine. At first, I told myself, it's just the busy season. She's trying to prove herself. But when the busy season stretched from a couple of weeks into what seemed like forever, that nagging feeling in my gut turned into full-blown unease. I'd come home after work, hoping to find her there, maybe cooking or just watching TV like she used to, but instead, I'd be greeted by an empty house. And let me tell you, there's nothing more unsettling than the silence of an empty house when you're expecting laughter and warmth. Every excuse she threw my way seemed plausible at first. Late meetings, an impromptu team dinner, work drinks, but the more she talked, the more cracks I started to see in her stories. I try to give her the benefit of the doubt, but when someone you love lies to your face, you can almost smell it, like a stench that lingers long after they've left the room. I remember one particular night. It was a Friday, the end of a long week. She told me she'd be home by 7, maybe 8 at the latest. So, I did what any husband would do. Cooked her favorite meal, set the table, even picked up that fancy wine she liked. But 8 came and went. Then 9. By 10, I was calling her phone, but she didn't pick up. Finally, around 11:30, she strolled in, looking way too put together for someone who just had a stressful work night. The hair was too perfect, the lipstick not even smudged. And when I asked why she was so late, she had this excuse ready to go. Sorry, babe. The boss decided to take the team out for drinks last minute. I couldn't say no. And the way she said it, so breezy and casual like it was nothing. That's what got me. Like I was some idiot who'd just swallow whatever she dished out. So I tried to talk to her. I thought, maybe if I laid it all out on the table, we could sort this out like adults. Sarah, I said one night when we were lying in bed, are you happy? I mean, is everything okay between us? She paused, only for a moment, but it felt like hours. And then she turned over, gave me that half smile she always used when she wanted to get out of a conversation, and said, of course, babe. Why wouldn't it be? You're just overthinking things. Work's just been crazy, that's all. And just like that, she shut me down, making me feel like I was the one who was out of line. And then there was Kelly. Kelly, the friend who always seemed to be there, lurking in the shadows, ready to fan the flames. She'd text me randomly, asking if everything was okay. Hey, just checking in. You seem tense lately, or Sarah seems to be working a lot these days, huh? You holding up all right? At first, I appreciated it. I mean, who wouldn't want a friend to lean on when things get tough? But then her text took a different tone. One night, out of the blue, she messaged me. I saw Sarah having coffee with some guy yesterday. Is everything cool between you two? That hit me like a punch to the gut. I asked who the guy was, but Kelly just brushed it off, saying it was probably nothing and she didn't want to get involved. That only made me spiral more. I'd find myself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every excuse Sarah had ever given me. And of course, Kelly knew how to keep the pot boiling. Whenever we'd meet up, she'd drop these little hints, these breadcrumbs leading nowhere but to my growing suspicion. You know, she'd say, if I were you, I'd just ask her straight up. Better to know than wonder, right? She'd say it like she was on my side, like she was looking out for me, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't buy into it at first. That's when Matthew came into the picture, some new guy from Sarah's work. I didn't know much about him except for what she told me. He was new to the team, smart, ambitious, a little quirky. She seemed to bring him up more than usual, and every time she mentioned him, there was this glimmer in her eyes, one I hadn't seen in a while. At first, I shrugged it off. I mean, everyone has a work husband or work wife, right? But Kelly wasn't about to let that slide. So, Matthew, she said one day, smirking as she sipped her drink. Sarah's been spending a lot of time with him, hasn't she? I tried to brush it off, but Kelly wouldn't let it go. I mean, she continued, it's probably nothing. But, like, sometimes you see the way two people look at each other, and, well, you know, that seed of doubt Kelly planted, it grew. Fast. And the more Sarah spent time at work, or at least claimed to, the more I started to wonder, was it really just a prank, or was something more going on? My head was spinning, and I couldn't find any answers. Liam and Amanda tried to be there for me. But how do you ask your friends, hey, do you think my wife is screwing some guy from work? Without sounding like you've lost your mind? Liam, always the logical one, told me to sit down with Sarah and have an honest conversation, but every time I tried, she'd shut it down. Amanda was a little more delicate about it. You guys just need some time together, just the two of you, she'd say, but we were so far past date nights and talks by then that it felt like a waste of breath. And so I stayed in limbo, feeling like my whole life was some twisted joke I didn't know how to laugh at. Every time Sarah walked through the door, every time her phone buzzed, I felt like my heart would explode. And there I was, trapped in this sick game, with no idea of the rules or how it would end. But man, if I thought things were bad then, I had no clue how much worse they could get. Because once the prank reached its breaking point, there'd be no going back. I think there's a moment in everyone's life when they can pinpoint the exact second things went to hell. For me, that moment was when Sarah sat me down and said, we need to talk. You know, those 4 words that never mean anything good. I was already on edge, Every night felt like a gamble. Every word she said a riddle. But that night, I knew something was coming, and I wasn't ready for it. She didn't beat around the bush. She went straight to the point, like ripping off a Band-Aid. "I've been seeing someone," she said. Just like that. No sugarcoating. No warning. And it wasn't just anyone. It was Matthew, work Matthew, the same guy she'd been going on and on about for weeks. My heart dropped right out of my chest. "It just happened," she said, her voice trembling like she was the one who'd been hurt. "I didn't mean for it to. I was confused, and he was just there." She kept saying it was an accident, like she'd tripped and fell into his arms, as if it somehow made it better or easier to swallow. She was sitting there trying to paint this picture of a woman who just lost her way and didn't know what she wanted. But I knew better. Deep down, I knew that accidents don't last for weeks, that confusion doesn't have you lying to your husband every single night. And yet, all I could do was sit there, staring at her like a deer caught in the headlights. I don't remember much of what I said in those first few minutes. I think I asked, "How long?" And she muttered something like a couple of weeks. But in that moment, time didn't matter. What did matter was how I felt everything shatter inside me. The trust, the love, all those years we spent building this life together. Gone. Just like that. I broke down right there, crying like I hadn't cried since I was a kid. And it wasn't just sadness. It was anger, betrayal, humiliation, all of it bubbling up inside like I was going to explode. How could she do this to me? To us? I thought back to every late night, every lie, every time she looked me in the eyes and swore she loved me. And in all of it, I still managed to do the one thing I shouldn't have. I blamed myself. I asked her if I wasn't enough, if I'd somehow pushed her into this. I begged her to explain how the hell this happened, as if knowing every detail would somehow fix the broken pieces. But she just sat there, half-heartedly trying to calm me down, all the while looking like she wanted to be anywhere but right there, facing the mess she'd made. Cue Kelly. Good old Kelly, always ready to help at just the right moment. I had barely processed Sarah's confession when my phone buzzed. "Hey, how are you doing?" Kelly's text read, like she knew. And maybe she did. Maybe Sarah had already told her, or maybe she just had that sixth sense that chaos was in the air. I didn't even think. I just needed anyone to tell me this wasn't happening. So I messaged back, and before I knew it, Kelly was at my door with a bottle of whiskey and that look on her face. That look that said, "I understand you better than anyone." And that's how I found myself pouring my heart out to her, sitting across from Kelly on my couch with glass after glass of whiskey going down like water. She played her part perfectly. "I can't believe she would do this to you," Kelly said, leaning in close, her hand on my shoulder. "You deserve so much better." I thought she was just being a friend, someone who cared. But I didn't see it for what it was, her trying to push me closer to the edge. I remember looking at her, the room spinning a little from all the drinking, and saying, "What am I supposed to do, Kelly? How am I supposed to move on from this?" She gave me this smile, this wicked, knowing smile, and said, "You don't have to move on. You need to get even." And that's when she dropped it. The idea. The revenge. The payback that would even the score. Why should she get away with hurting you? Kelly's voice was low, almost seductive. You know what they say, an eye for an eye. I tried to protest at first, tell her that wasn't who I was, but she just leaned in closer, her breath warm on my neck, whispering in my ear, "Don't you want to make her feel what you're feeling right now? Don't you want her to know what it's like to be betrayed?" I wish I could say I was strong enough to walk away, but I wasn't. I was angry, broken, and vulnerable, and Kelly knew it. So we drank more and more until my head was spinning, and all I could think about was how badly I wanted to hurt Sarah back. And Kelly, she was right there, ready to make sure I did. Before I knew it, we were in my bedroom, clothes flying off like they were on fire. It wasn't like I wanted her. Not in any real way. It was more about forgetting, about drowning out the pain with something, anything else. And Kelly, she knew exactly what to say, what to do, to make it all feel like it was justified, like this was exactly what I needed to get back at Sarah. And for a while it worked. I was caught up in this twisted, messy mix of anger and desire and self-pity, and I let it consume me. But once the adrenaline faded, once the booze wore off, and I was left lying there in the silence with Kelly sleeping beside me, That's when the guilt hit me like a truck. What the hell had I done? I wanted to puke, to run away, to go back in time and undo everything. But I couldn't. The damage was done. And I knew, deep down, that Kelly wasn't going to just let this stay between us. No, she had plans. Plans that didn't include keeping quiet. So there I was, having just thrown gasoline on an already raging fire, and I had no clue what was coming next. But one thing was certain. Things were only going to get messy, and fast. The thing about making a bad decision is that it doesn't just hit you all at once. It creeps up on you in waves. At first, it feels liberating, like a release of all the pin-up anger and frustration. And then it crashes down with the weight of all the regret. That night with Kelly was like that. A terrible, exhilarating storm that I never saw coming. After Sarah's confession, I was a mess. And Kelly? She was right there, fueling my anger and resentment like she'd been waiting for this moment. Her words echoed in my head. You deserve this. It's revenge for what she did to you. Let loose for once. And it was hard not to give in. Everything about that night felt like one long, downward spiral, where nothing made sense and everything felt like it was happening to someone else. The drinking didn't help. It was like I was on autopilot, my body moving without any real thought. I remember Kelly pulling me close, whispering in my ear, telling me how much I deserved to be happy, how I deserved to be with someone who actually cared about me. Her hands on my chest, her breath on my skin, everything about it felt like the complete opposite of what Sarah had put me through. And I think that's what made me go through with it. That feeling of being wanted, of being in control, even if just for a moment. I didn't even notice when Kelly took my phone and turned it off. I guess she didn't want any interruptions. No late-night calls from Sarah wondering where I was, no messages to break the tension. She was all in on making sure this night was ours, wrapped in secrecy, shielded from reality. And in that twisted moment, I was okay with it. I let it happen. And man, it was intense. It was raw. We tore into each other like animals, both of us driven by some mix of anger, lust, and revenge. Every touch, every kiss, felt like I was crossing a line that I couldn't uncross. And yet, there was a part of me, a sick, broken part, that loved it, that wanted to lose myself in that darkness, to forget, to feel something other than betrayal and heartbreak. Kelly was right there, feeding into it, making it feel like this was exactly what I needed to heal. And for those hours, tangled in her sheets, I let myself believe it. But morning has a way of bringing clarity, doesn't it? I woke up to sunlight cutting through the blinds, a dull ache in my head from all the drinking, and the unmistakable realization that I'd screwed up. Badly. Kelly was still asleep beside me, the sheets wrapped around her like some messed-up cocoon of guilt. And all I could think was, what have I done? I wanted to crawl out of that bed, out of that room, and just disappear. I wanted to go back to the night before and make different choices. But it was too late. My clothes were scattered across the floor, my phone was still off, and my heart was pounding in my chest like it was going to burst. I picked up my phone and just stared at it for a while, afraid to turn it on, afraid to face whatever messages or missed calls might be waiting for me. But Kelly, she had other plans. She woke up, stretched like a cat who'd just had the best sleep of her life, and looked at me with this smirk like she knew something I didn't. Morning, she purred, her voice dripping with satisfaction. I couldn't even look her in the eyes. The guilt, the shame, it was too much. But Kelly didn't seem to care. She was already getting up, walking around like this was any other day, like what we'd done was normal. Hey, don't look so down, she said, throwing on a robe. Last night, that was for you. For us. And besides, she added with a shrug, Sarah had it coming. She deserved every bit of this. I didn't know what to say. I felt hollow, like my insides had been scooped out and filled with lead. I mumbled something about needing to get home, needing to think, but Kelly wasn't having it. Come on, she insisted, pulling me into the kitchen. Let's have breakfast. We could talk about everything. Don't you want to know what's next? What do you mean, what's next? I asked, not even sure if I wanted to hear the answer. Kelly gave me this look, one of those looks that told me she was already 3 steps ahead. You don't think we're just going to let her walk away, do you? She broke your heart, and you got a taste of payback last night. But trust me, it's only the beginning. And that's when I realized something. Kelly wasn't just in this for me. She was in it for her. This was her game, and I was just another pawn. I don't know what her endgame was. Maybe she wanted to destroy Sarah. Maybe she wanted me for herself. Or maybe she just got off on the chaos. But whatever it was, I knew one thing for sure. Last night wasn't going to stay a secret. Not if Kelly had anything to say about it. I sat there in silence, staring at the breakfast she'd laid out in front of me. Eggs, bacon, toast, like nothing had happened. Like we were just two friends sharing a meal, not two people who'd just blown up their lives. And as much as I wanted to run, to leave all of this behind, I couldn't. I was trapped in her web, tangled up in lies. And for the life of me, I didn't know how to get out. You know, they say the truth will set you free, but they never tell you how much it'll tear you apart first. After that night with Kelly, I felt like I was carrying around a loaded gun, just waiting for it to go off. But I never expected Kelly to pull the trigger herself. The day after our night of revenge, I was barely holding it together. I couldn't think straight, couldn't eat, couldn't even look myself in the mirror. And just when I thought I'd have some time to figure things out, Kelly decided it was time to reveal our little secret. Only, she didn't do it gently. She didn't do it with the slightest bit of remorse. She did it like she was trying to set off fireworks to blow up everything in her path. I was sitting at home, nursing a coffee that had gone cold when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah. "We need to talk. Now." I could feel my heart drop into my stomach, and I just knew Kelly had already gone to her. I called Sarah, but she didn't pick up. I texted, got nothing back. And then, maybe an hour later, I heard her car pull into the driveway like she was trying to rip up the pavement. The door flew open, and there she was, furious, eyes red, shaking like she was ready to explode. "How could you?" she screamed, standing there like she was ready to fight. "How the hell could you do this to me?" She threw her bag on the floor, and I swear for a second I thought she was going to hit me. "I know everything," she spat, her voice cracking with rage. "Kelly told me everything about last night. You cheated on me?" And there it was, the moment where everything I'd been holding on to came crumbling down. She knew. She knew about me and Kelly, and the way she looked at me, I've never seen hate like that. But what got to me the most was that she had the audacity to call me the cheater. "Oh, don't you dare act like you're innocent." I shot back, my voice rising to match hers. "You're the one who started all this. You're the one who accidentally screwed around with Matthew, remember? You're the one who thought this whole thing was some kind of game." And just like that, we were off, screaming at each other, tearing down whatever little bit of love we had left. I blamed her for everything, for the lies, for the betrayal, for dragging me into this mess. She blamed me for turning to Kelly, for taking it too far, as if somehow what she did was forgivable and what I did was the worst thing in the world. We were both in pieces, shouting over each other like two people who had completely forgotten they once loved each other. And Kelly? She just sat back and let it all unfold, like it was some show she'd been dying to watch. It wasn't long before Liam and Amanda showed up. They had heard from Sarah, who probably called them the minute Kelly dropped the bomb. And suddenly, our living room turned into a battleground. Amanda was trying to calm Sarah down, pulling her to the side, telling her to take deep breaths, but Sarah was having none of it. "Don't tell me to calm down," she yelled. "My husband slept with my best friend. How am I supposed to calm down?" Liam, on the other hand, came to me. "Dude, what the hell is going on?" he asked, genuinely confused. "Is any of this true?" I could only nod. My head hung low like some guilty dog who just pissed on the carpet. "Yeah," I muttered. "It's all true." And then came the questions, the endless barrage of "why would you do this?" and "what were you thinking?" But how was I supposed to explain it? How was I supposed to make sense of a situation that never should have happened in the first place? And as if things weren't already chaotic enough, Matthew showed up. I don't know if Sarah called him, or if Kelly did it to stir the pot even more, but there he was, standing in the doorway like the world's most unwelcome guest. "So, this is what's going on, huh?" he said, trying to look as innocent as possible. "You're just airing out all the dirty laundry, huh?" It was then that things really went off the rails. Sarah, now completely beside herself, turned on Matthew. This is your fault too," she screamed. "You were part of this. You dragged me into this. And now look where we are." But Matthew, he just shrugged like it wasn't his problem. Hey, I never promised you anything, all right? You made your choices. And that was it. The argument hit its peak. Everyone was yelling. Sarah was yelling at me, at Kelly, at Matthew. Liam was trying to get me to explain myself. Amanda was pleading for everyone to calm down. And Kelly? She just sat there with this smug grin on her face, like this was all some game she'd won. Like she was the only one who had come out of this unscathed. By the end of it, Sarah was done. She looked at me, her face streaked with tears, and said, I'm filing for divorce. I can't do this anymore. I won't. And just like that, she walked out, slamming the door behind her, leaving me standing there with nothing but the shattered pieces of our life together. I didn't even try to stop her. What was the point? We were beyond saving. And in that moment, I knew it. I knew that all the love, all the trust, all the years we'd spent together were gone. We'd burned it all to the ground, and there was no going back. Liam and Amanda left shortly after, giving me those awkward, sympathetic looks that people give when they don't know what to say. And Matthew? He disappeared as quickly as he came, not even bothering to look back. But Kelly stayed. She stayed there, sitting on my couch, looking at me like I was some sort of victory prize. Well, she said, that was interesting. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just walked into the bedroom, shut the door, and collapsed on the bed, feeling like I'd been hollowed out. It was over. Sarah was gone, and all that was left was the wreckage. When you lose everything you thought you wanted, you're forced to figure out what you really need. And after Sarah filed for divorce, after the dust settled and the screaming matches became nothing more than echoes in the past, I was left with just that. Me, myself, and a hell of a mess to clean up. The first few months were rough. I won't lie. There were days I could barely drag myself out of bed. And when I did, it was like I was dragging a ball and chain behind me. Every room, every object, every smell in that house reminded me of Sarah, of what we'd had, of what we lost. And every time I thought about Kelly, I'd get this pit in my stomach like I'd swallowed poison. The regret, the guilt, the anger, they gnawed at me constantly. It was like I was haunted by everything that had happened, and I couldn't escape it. The divorce itself was straightforward, and maybe that was the worst part. There were no arguments over who got what, no battle over possessions. We just agreed to split and walked away. It felt too easy, too simple for something that had once meant everything. And when the papers were finally signed and I handed over the pen, I remember looking at Sarah one last time, trying to find some trace of the woman I once loved. But all I saw was a stranger. And I guess she saw the same in me. I wish I could say that signing those papers brought instant relief, that the second I put pen to paper, the weight lifted off my shoulders. But it didn't. It took time, a lot of it. And it was messy. I went through every emotion you can think of: denial, anger, sadness, bitterness. But eventually, slowly, I started to find my way back to myself. I moved out of the house. Too many memories, too much history. I rented a small apartment downtown, one of those cheap places with paper-thin walls and a view of a brick wall that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the 80s. But it was mine, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control again. I could start over, without the baggage of Sarah and Kelly weighing me down. Sarah and Kelly, God, those two. Funny thing is, after everything blew up, they had their own falling out. Sarah eventually realized that Kelly was never a real friend, that all those years of pretending to care were just a pretext for whatever twisted game Kelly was playing. They cut ties, and just like that, Kelly was out of both our lives. Last I heard, Kelly moved out of town, probably finding some new drama to stir up in someone else's life. Good riddance. As for Sarah, I don't know what she's doing now, and honestly, I don't care. I blocked her on everything, cut off all contact. It was the only way I could heal, to put the past in a box and bury it deep. We needed to go our separate ways, and that's exactly what we did. She got her freedom, and I got mine. I threw myself into hobbies, into distractions, anything to keep my mind off of everything that happened. I started working out, joined a gym, and for the first time in years, I felt good about myself. I picked up a guitar that had been gathering dust in the closet, learning chords and strumming songs until my fingers bled. And it helped, finding those little things that reminded me of who I was that kept me moving forward when all I wanted to do was look back. I also started reconnecting with friends, the ones I distanced myself from while I was drowning in my marriage. I started going out more, meeting new people, finding reasons to laugh again. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, breakdowns, nights when I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd lost. But each day got a little easier, a little less painful. And eventually, that tight grip around my chest started to loosen. There's a weird kind of freedom that comes with hitting rock bottom. It's like once you've lost everything, you have nothing left to fear. And as much as I hated what happened, what Sarah did, what I did, I learned from it. I learned that sometimes people aren't who you think they are, that trust is fragile, and that revenge only leaves you more broken than when you started. Looking back, I see how all the little choices, the lies, the secrets, and the manipulations led to where we ended up. It's like a chain of dominoes, one tiny push, and everything comes crashing down. And maybe it was all inevitable. Maybe we were always going to end up like this. Or maybe if I'd seen the signs earlier, if I'd called out the bullshit instead of turning a blind eye, things could have been different. But that's just life, isn't it? A whole bunch of what-ifs. And if there's one thing I could take away from all of this, it's that honesty really does matter. Not just with the people around you, but with yourself. I think back to those early days when Sarah talked about her prank, when Kelly was whispering in my ear, and all the while my gut was screaming at me that something was wrong. But I didn't listen. I didn't trust myself. And that's the lesson, I guess. Trust your instincts. Be real with yourself and the people in your life. Because if you don't, you're setting yourself up for a world of hurt. So yeah, that's my story. It wasn't easy to live, and it sure as hell isn't easy to tell. But I came out the other side stronger, wiser, and more at peace than I ever thought I'd be. I moved on, found new things to be passionate about, new reasons to get up in the morning. And for once, I'm living life on my own terms. No more games. No more lies. Just me figuring it out one day at a time. And as for Sarah, as for Kelly, they're just chapters in a book that I'm finally ready to close.